What is going on, everybody? It is Dylan with Astrodfs bringing you a brand new video. Today's video going over the Thursday Night Showdown between the Steelers and Browns. And this one kind of seems like an ugly division game. Obviously, Cleveland not in the best spot anymore. But with that, they have Jameis. Jameis throws the ball a lot. On the Pittsburgh side, we have a surprisingly good Pittsburgh Steelers team. And when I say surprisingly good, like Pittsburgh's always going to have a competitive team, but they're winning games. They're beating a lot of people. I don't think a lot of us had the Steelers where they're at right now. But Russell Wilson is really locking in for Pittsburgh and finding ways to win the game, just in odd ways, but they are winning games. So the weather obviously probably going to be a factor in this one. It seems like a good amount of wind, possibly some rain. It seems very, very unlikely, but could happen. We get snow in that one, but the weather should play a factor in this one. Cleveland's defense has been very, very bad, which has allowed Jameis to do Jameis things, throw the ball a lot. Just because they need to play catch up, they need to pace the other team's offense. So Cleveland's passing the ball a lot. Pittsburgh likes to control the game. Like, they like their defense. They feel very confident in their defense of shutting down other offenses. And Russell Wilson and his offense just needs to control the clock. Have some good runs, good play action. Use George Pickens, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So going over it, we only have two players above 10K on the slate, George Pickens and Russell Wilson. George Pickens in a really, really good spot against Cleveland. Number one leader in red zone targets for that team. Matchup is amazing. Real like him in this one. Granted, the weather could play a factor in his outcome, but I still think he does good for what he gets in that game. Russell Wilson on the the guy going to throw the ball to him. I liked Russ. I think Russ started off pretty good with Pittsburgh. Last week against Baltimore kind of worried me a little bit, just because of how poor Baltimore's defense has been. Granted, it's a Pittsburgh versus Baltimore rivalry. Those teams play they play Super Bowls against each other. That's how those two franchises play. Pittsburgh kind of getting shut down by Baltimore's secondary is concerning, but we saw against the Jets a really good game. We saw against the Washington, granted another bad defense, a really good game. Now we get Cleveland secondary, so another good opportunity for Russell Wilson in this one. I don't know if I need to pay 10K for Russ on this slate. I think both teams who the defenses play really good against the running back. Pittsburgh's going to use their running backs. That's going to be the way they're going to go. They use them not only in the ground but in the receiving game as well. So Najee Harris, Jalen Warren probably going to get a good amount of volume. Is Russ one of the top scorers on the slate? Probably. But do I love it? No, not really. I really don't. I want to get George Pickens in my lineup, that's for sure. Do I need to get Russ? Maybe, right? Jameis Winston, we look at his numbers. This is what you want out of a backup quarterback. Is a guy that's going to throw the ball, and he's thrown the ball, right? 3 games that he has started for this team. He's played a Baltimore defense. He's played a New Orleans defense. Now, granted, Cleveland's defense was really bad, but Jameis, 30 completions, 46 attempts, almost 400 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks for Jameis, and they scored 14 points. That's what Cleveland's offense was. Against a team like Baltimore, to where, we saw Pittsburgh, right? Pittsburgh barely beat Baltimore. Not Cleveland. They beat Baltimore. They beat them. It was pretty convincing. Jameis has a really good game against them. So I do like Jameis more than Russ. I just think the ceiling is higher for him. So for $400 cheaper, I like Jameis more. Najee and Jalen Warren it's really tough to pick these two guys, right? Honestly, if Pittsburgh gets in the red zone, it's going to be Najee, but doesn't mean that Jalen Warren's not going to get some work. I mean, Najee's just gotten a pretty good consistency of volume. Granted, playing Washington and Baltimore, two teams better against the run, he doesn't perform. But, you face the Giants, the Jets, the Raiders in those games, defenses that have not been good against the run, and he's had success. So I am skeptical of playing Najee in this one. Obviously, he gets 7 points for the receiving game, but he needs a touchdown. He needs some receiving work to kind of pay off at this 9,200 price point against a team that's good against running backs, right? Kamara didn't have a good game against Cleveland. Cleveland gave up a lot of rushing yards, but guess who it was to? Not Alvin Kamara. It was Taysom Hill. So if you're looking at, Cleveland just allowed 200 rushing yards, it was to Taysom Hill. It was not Kamara. They played pretty good against Kamara. Nick Chubb, I was very, very high on Nick Chubb. I had him in a lot of tournament lines. And 11 for 50, averaging 4.5 yards a run isn't bad. It's not. But they did not get in the red zone for Nick Chubb. They did not use him in the receiving work, which he's never truly been a big receiving back. But they didn't use him. They like Jerome Ford, I'm pretty sure, outsnapped Nick Chubb or got pretty damn close. Because it seemed like Nick Chubb was consistently out of the game for Cleveland. Stefanski said, they got a short turnaround. Maybe they're saving Chubb for this game. I would prefer Chubb over Harris and Warren, but I need Nick Chubb to get 20 plus carries. I need it to happen for him to pay off. So I am very skeptical about the running backs in this slate. I do think both teams use their running backs. I think that's the way they go. The success is very unclear of what running backs are gonna pop off. I prefer Chubb over Harris and Warren. I'll say that, but yeah, this a 37 total showdown is not pretty, right? That's a 21-17 basically game, so not expecting a whole lot of scoring. Jerry Jeudy, I think I prefer Jeudy over Tillman now. I think last week was kind of a big indication on that. 3 weeks with Jameis as quarterback, 12.9, 14.3, and 29.2. Last 2 weeks, 22 targets for him. We go and look at Cedric Tillman, and it's not saying that Cedric Tillman's not getting any love from Jameis either. 8 targets, 11 targets, 9 targets. A couple of red zone opportunities for Cedric Tillman in that game. Jerry Jeudy just had a lot of big plays in the last week's game. But I think both have good matchups. Yet again, the weather, if this was sunny weather, or not sunny, obviously it's a night game, but clear skies type of game that wasn't possibly really cold to where it's going to snow, and the passing game would be amazing in this one. So Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, very comparable in this one, but Njoku at 7,600 is very, very interesting if he's good to go. I think he's in a really good spot against Pittsburgh. Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews, if you combine them, have a really good game. You go back a few weeks, Brock Bowers has a really good game. David Njoku, same thing with having Winston as his quarterback, 17.1, 7.9, and 19.1. So Njoku's seen, pretty consistent targets. The yards is what's different. And yeah, Jerry Jeudy leads the team in red zone targets, and Njoku kind of in the middle of the pack, but I still think it's a really good matchup for him, and he's 400 off of Jerry Jeudy. Elijah Moore kind of behind everyone again. Granted, in that game, 8 targets, 6 for 66, and a tutty. Paid off way more than Cedric Tillman, especially at the price point. So Elijah Moore still has a good matchup. I would just prefer, Jeudy number 1, then Tillman. But I'm picking Njoku over Jeudy. So as far as pass catchers, Njoku, Jeudy, Tillman, Moore is where I'm at. Both defenses, I would say Pittsburgh's defense is really in play for me. We just saw on Monday a defense from the Texans that were 6,200. and they paid off. Now you get a Pittsburgh's defense that's, guess what, facing an offense that gives up the most pressures to a team. So you're hoping you get a similar result almost from the Steelers defense like they did against Baltimore. 2 sacks, 2 fumbles, and a pick, right? So 9 points out of them. And that's giving up 16 points. So granted, they are on the road, but I don't know. It's a division game again. You know, Mike Tomlin loves his division games. Pittsburgh's defense, I think, is in a great spot. I'm not too worried about anything. Jameis is gonna be Jameis, but if the weather is bad, I'm gonna pick Pittsburgh's defense. Yet again, this affects Chris Boswell. If the weather is gonna be windy, I'm not as worried about the rain and snow. But if it's gonna be windy, well, the rain maybe a little bit. If it's gonna be really windy, granted, that's all Chris Boswell has done his entire career is kick in the wind. But, you know, it does kind of make you a little skeptical. But, I mean, Chris Boswell, when he kicks, I mean, he lights out this season. One of the most consistent kickers we've had this season. Thankfully, if you have him in fantasy like I do in a few leagues, he's definitely paid off. I mean, 2 games we've seen Chris Boswell win the game for the team, right? Week 1 against Atlanta, week 11 against Baltimore. He scored all of their points. You know, both defenses are actually pretty good. I would say Pittsburgh's red zone defense, really good. Cleveland's red zone offense, bad. So kind of like Hopkins in that. Pittsburgh's red zone offense has been terrible. And Cleveland's Pittsburgh defense has been kind of bad. So there is opportunities for Pittsburgh's offense if they can start to click to score in this Cleveland defense when they get to the red zone. But if not, Chris Boswell is definitely in play. Hopkins is just, Cleveland goes for it quite a bit. Hopkins, clearly, you could see 70% on the season. Look at his games. Only paid off in a few games this season. Cleveland just struggles to get to the red zone, and then they kind of struggle in the red zone. So I'm not as much on Hopkins as I am Boswell. I just prefer Boswell. Going down in here, Cleveland's defense, you could say I'm not the highest on them, right? Dealing with a lot of injuries altogether, but I mean, you look at their defense so far this season, they really haven't paid off truly for what you expect out of a defense on a primetime slate, right? 10, 11, 10 has been kind of the most you've seen this season against a Pittsburgh's offense who, I mean, besides the Baltimore game, they pretty much clicked with Russ in, so I'm looking at guys down here of Pat Freiermuth at 3,600, Darnell Washington at 2,400. I think either one of these guys are playable. Obviously, they both saw the same snap share last week, so I think both tight ends are in play. Pat Freiermuth I slightly like more than Darnell Washington, but I think Darnell Washington's still in a really good spot. He gets on the field quite a bit. And then Calvin Austin, the third, at 2,000 is like, if you want to go, you know, 2 cheap guys on Pittsburgh, Austin and Freiermuth are there. I honestly, if you're paying up for George Pickens and Russell Wilson, I don't really want to get 2 of these guys down here. I want to get 1. If I'm going Russ and George Pickens, obviously if you're picking Russ, you're expecting passes. So you want George Pickens. You got to decide, do you want Pat Freiermuth? Do you want Calvin Austin? Do you want Darnell Washington? You could say Van Jefferson and Mike Williams, but I would just prefer Calvin Austin. On the Cleveland side, like Jerome Ford down there at 4,400. But, I mean, the pass catchers for Cleveland are all up here, right? Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman, Jerry Jeudy, and David Njoku, they all see a good amount of the snap share. Jamari Thrash, 1,200. I'll put him in there as someone to just look at. Cordell Patterson, 1,000. Like, that's pretty much the 2. Thrash and Patterson would be guys that possibly get on the field slightly, but there's not a lot of upside. So if you're looking someone for cheap for Cleveland, it's Thrash at 1,200, but it's going to be tough for him to get on the field and see snaps. Jerome Ford at 4,400. I mean, like this season, Jerome Ford just has not been good. Has not. Like, it was clear they missed Nick Chubb this season, so I'm not really on Jerome Ford in this one. So if you're looking for values, Pat Freiermuth 3,600, Darnell Washington 2,400, Calvin Austin 2K, Jamari Thrash 1,200, Cordell Patterson 1,000. Kind of the guys we're looking at for this one. And then pay-ups, favorite pay-ups, George Pickens at 11, Russ at 10, Jameis at 96, Nick Chubb at 9K, and then Njoku 7,600. So I hope you guys did enjoy this video. Hopefully this game's not as bad as it looks on paper. So yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll have the main slate videos going out later this week, so check those out. I'll see you in the next one.